Welcome to DMM Downloads. We are podcasting another conversation about DMM between Jeff Crabtree and me, Rudy Rivera. Jeff and I are teamed together in Northern Colorado in a ministry we call DMM NOCO. DMM NOCO is unleashing disciple-making movements in Northern Colorado, and we thought it a good idea to start a podcast as a way to bring awareness and resourcing to ordinary people who are passionate about making multiplying disciple makers in our natural networks. Thanks for joining us in this journey. We hope you get a DMM download from this conversation. Well, hey, Jeff.
Hey, Rudy.
We're back again for another DMM download, and I think we're close to the end of the habits section of this podcast, which we really felt like we wanted to start exploring a little bit more. And so we've come to multiply, the habit of multiply, which in our habits training is the last habit we really work through and try to train. And so kind of like what we normally do, we're going to toss it over to Jeff and see if we can start exploring together.
Yeah, what a journey we're on. And even with our listeners, we kind of coming to that final part of our pathway to movement.
Not the end of the podcast.
No. We'll keep doing podcasts till Jesus comes back, or who knows. To the end of our habits training, and kind of, if you will, the seventh principle we lean into is what we call multiply, or we could even call it replicate. So we just wanted to unpack that one for people that are on the journey trying to learn a little bit about how to launch or catalyze disciple-making movements.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so when we talk about the habit of multiply, what are we really trying to address there?
Yeah, well, that's interesting, Rudy. You know, I've been in the movement world, I think 7.5 years, and so been exposed to our training quite a bit. And so I don't know that I was really ready to kind of unpack this whole thing called multiply or replicate. So I'll just take you on the journey of kind of what I learned. I think the first thing I learned is God's interested in mathematics. I never thought of it that way. And yet in the book of Genesis, God says to Adam and Eve, I want you to be fruitful and what? Multiply. Well, I read over that. I really had not thought about that a lot. And so you can think of it in terms of having kids who have kids who have kids. You know, it's that whole lineage of multiplication that way. Or you can think of it in the spiritual realm as well. And so I think I saw in Genesis something I'd never seen before, that God really does have a view towards multiplication. And I think it's added then, even if you go to Genesis 12 in the Abrahamic covenant, he said that I want you to go to a place I'll show you, reveal my glory. I'll bless those who bless you. I'll curse those who curse you. And you will be a blessing to all the peoples of the earth. So I won't unpack it too much here, but I think we see an element of multiplication there. And I'll just add a couple more, then jumping to the New Testament, and then we can do a little deeper dive if you're interested. Then I think we do see Jesus encouraging us that he wants us to bear fruit, and that fruit would what? We say abide or remain. Well, if we look under the hood, really it's multiplication or replication. God wants us to bear fruit, and we could talk about what is that fruit. People think is the fruit of the Spirit. I would say that we could have a discussion. I'm not sure that's what it means, but I think it really says to be fruitful in our disciple making, and that fruit should multiply or replicate. And then I'll put the bookend, at least for the New Testament here, is we can look at Paul to Timothy, 2 Timothy 2:2. We talk a lot about, but I don't know that we maybe do a deeper dive in what that means, or even in practicality. Paul says to Timothy, the things you've heard and seen in me, pass on or multiply to other people, plural, who will pass it on to other people, plural. That's really not addition. It really is multiplication. So in this whole thing of catalyzing or launching disciple-making movements in all the habits we've meant to, talks about so far, we want to keep in mind that ultimately the goal is to multiply, to replicate, so that the gospel can spread virally into social networks and beyond, that the Great Commission could be fulfilled. Because I don't think we can see the Great Commission being fulfilled in the model or mindset of addition. So I'll leave it there. What do you think, Rudy?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there.
A lot there to chew on?
Yeah, a lot to chew on. That last statement's really intriguing. So when you talk about, you're using multiply and replicate, and I like to garden, okay? So you know this about me, but I'm thinking, I'm in spring mode. It's in April 2025, we're recording this. I'm preparing for the summer crops, which won't be harvested until probably August, a lot of them, okay? And for me, this is the first year I've taken my gardening, quote unquote, to the next level, if you can call it that, where I am trying to collect seeds out of existing plants from last year, preserve them to use them this year.
Good.
That's the next level for me for gardening, okay? Instead of going to the store every year and buying a new plant, I'm trying to see if I can use the old plant multiplied into multiple plants. Now, what's interesting about that for me is, let's say one tomato plant produces 50 tomatoes, and each tomato has countless seeds.
Right. Good.
I think that's what you're talking about. To me, there's a visible picture in my own gardening habits where I'm trying to get to that multiplying level. And it's hard. There's a challenge to that. But given its natural design, it really is intended to do that.
Right, Rudy.
Can you use what I don't know if that's making any sense, but speak more to
multiplication. Well, I think first I'd say that I love you, but I can't really relate to you in the gardening illustration.
Sure.
So I think it's great, and I think it's profound, and I think you can unpack a spiritual truth out of a natural reality, and many people on the podcast will be able to relate to that. Not me. I'm a golfer. Don't get me on in the planting.
Yeah, direct message me if you like to garden. And
there you go. You guys get into conversations. Well, a good friend of mine, Harry Brown, who leads New Generations Global, put it this way, is that we oftentimes in a Western culture, it's one generation and done. At least in making disciples, that we might make a disciple, but then it doesn't work out that those disciples make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. We're almost in an addition mode rather than multiplication. And he's basically saying, like you're saying, is that inside fruit there's multiple seeds, but what we do if we're in an addition mentality is that it's like there's only one seed. No, there's multiple seeds that need to be spread and replanted and grow and replicate. Otherwise, the Great Commission is going to be held hostage to a mentality and a mindset of addition. Now, we don't want it to be that, and we haven't really thought about that, but I really do believe disciple-making movements and in our habits training, it really puts multiplication, replication on the radar for us to talk about and describe. So then I throw it back to you. What else in your whole gardening thing, because I told you I can't relate to that, what else do you see how in the natural it seems to be a bridge to the supernatural world in regard to multiplication?
Well, I'll maybe unpack that a little bit, but I also want to say, and I'd love for you to explore this, seedless fruit. And you and I have talked about this. We go to our grocery stores and we buy seedless grapes, for example. At least our family does.
Right.
If I buy seeded grapes and bring them home,
nobody
eats them.
Ain't gonna work.
It ain't gonna work. Seedless watermelons, right? And so I think essentially, we've talked about this, but our food industry is kind of engineered the
Correct.
natural out of our fruit, right? For convenience, probably. Ooh, we could talk about that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Western culture,
They're getting dangerous now, Rudy.
convenience, yeah. But in the spiritual sense, when we're talking about disciple making, that's a big question. Have we engineered the seeds out of our fruit, out of the fruit we see? We could explore that sometimes. So seedless fruit is what we produce. In terms of the natural and the supernatural, the very first thing that came to mind I didn't know you were going to ask me that, but I think of birds, animals, and bees, for example. So bird comes down, eats a raspberry, flies away. We know what happens to food ingested in animals. It gets expelled, drops a seed somewhere else, raspberry grows somewhere else. So the concept of how seeds scatter, they're scattered by human hand intentionally. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to work towards.
Sure.
But they're also scattered through the natural process and design of God.
Correct.
The wind blows a dandelion weed into your yard. Where did it come from? I pay hundreds of dollars every month to keep dandelions out. Well, I've got a field right behind me full of millions of dandelion seeds. They will fly into my yard regardless of how much I pay an exterminator to keep them out. And I have to remove them by hand, if you will, right? So, yeah, the natural design of God, whether it be the
Right.
wind or the weather or the birds or the
Love it.
animals, is to multiply his creation. That's how he's designed this. I don't know if you've ever looked at a dandelion, by the way, really up
I
close.
pull them out of my yard.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. If you pull them out of your yard, but if you do a little bit more digging, literally digging, go a couple inches down. This is really scary. If you hate dandelions, it's really scary. I hate dandelions, so I'm scared of this picture. Just dig down a little bit. You see one flower on top. There are actually buried under there probably anywhere from 10 to 20 flowers
Wow.
right underneath the one you see. So if you pull up the one, you need to make sure you get the other 10 to 20. And by the way, the 10 to 20 probably have hundreds of seeds per flower.
In the root.
It's really annoying, right?
Yeah.
Because they just do their job
Yep.
by design.
Do their job. That's interesting.
And they do it well by design,
Yeah.
right? We've engineered that, I think, a lot of times
Understand.
out of our disciple making.
That's really good. Again, I don't relate to all of that, so I love you, but I don't understand. I don't relate to gardening and to dandelions except to throw a little fertilizer on to kill them. But
Yeah, kill them.
yeah, I think a natural picture of a spiritual reality, you said, that it's already ingrained in an organic thought of God's design. Is we're just taking those natural realities and superimposing them, if you will, on the supernatural in regard to disciple making.
Yeah, I think when
fulfilling
we
the
talk
Great
about
Commission.
disciple-making movement, then we talk about if you are a plant, then in you is the seed of the gospel, which is intended by God's design to be replicated
Correct.
into hundreds and thousands over and over and over again. Oh, here's a thought. Man, I didn't know we were
Watch
gonna-
out.
I didn't know
Watch out, our listeners. Rudy's got a thought.
Yeah, I didn't know we were going to turn into a gardening podcast today. But here's the thought. Do you know the difference between annual and perennial plants?
Yeah, one comes back and the other one doesn't. Right?
Correct,
See,
right.
I'm really good at this.
You are. So think about that. I just thought about that. Are we not intended to be perennials?
Sure.
That
point.
every year we produce more and more and more seeds where God
Wow,
produces it in us.
Rudy, watch
And
out.
then every year we come back and regrow bigger, stronger, more vibrant. I've got a lilac bush out here that actually has 6 little babies growing from last year. It survived the winter and now it's popping up 6 new little babies. If I leave it there, it's going to turn into 20 more little babies after that, and on and on and on. You want a lilac bush? I can pull one up for you.
Yeah,
But
there you go.
anyhow, that's
Good visual picture of a
Yeah.
spiritual reality.
yeah. So that's
job.
multiply. When I think multiply, to me, the habit of it, I think partly, am I leaning into God's design for me to replicate my life? Am I being intentional with it? Is it strategic, if you will? Am I allowing God to do what he naturally wants to do in and through me? by his design. But that's my take on it.
Yeah,
What are your
that's
thoughts?
really good. I think we've said on this podcast that we're not always just trying to be definitive about some things or all things. We're saying we want to wrestle and contemplate some things that we maybe never did in the traditional legacy attractional model. And so that's why I'm saying this whole thing when I got introduced to DMM and our habits training and this whole idea of multiplication and replication, it was a new world to me. It put it on the radar for a lot of biblical understanding. And so for me, I think it's a critical thing is that are we looking at multiplication and replication in our making disciples and sending disciples out among the lost?
Do you, as we close here, is there anything you'd want to say to close? And I know we're probably going to have another episode.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So anything you'd want to add, or just want to end it there?
I just would say thank you to those that are listening that are trying to maybe step into a space where you're being exposed to or learning a little bit more. And so we just say, if you have any interest in talking to us more, you maybe listen to our podcast, but you have other questions about this or something else, please get in touch with us. We'd love to have more discussion with you. So I just would kind of springboard off into please get in touch with us. We would like to talk to you more about disciple making or DMM or habits training or this whole idea of multiplication and replication.
Perfect, Jeff. Thanks for another great download.
Thank you, Rudy.
Thanks, Jeff, for that engaging download. In DMM, we like to say that disciples are learners. I know I'm learning a lot from my conversations with you, Jeff. From all of us in DMM NOCO, we hope you got a DMM download from the conversation today. Don't forget to leave this podcast a review wherever you are listening online. If you found this conversation helpful, please head over to our site, dmmnoco.com, where you can find more content for your DMM journey, including a self-paced Habits of a Multiplying Disciple course. The course is designed to give you practical next steps to becoming a DMM practitioner and multiplying disciple maker. You can take that course for free at dmmnoco.com. We will be back next week with another engaging DMM download episode. Until then, may you hear from God through His Spirit and take simple steps of obedience in what you hear.